Most men never realize how quietly a woman can destroy their focus, confidence, and destiny until it's too late. This message isn't to blame her, it's to wow you up. Watch till the end. Your entire mindset about women and self-worth will change forever. Comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more life-changing motivation. It always begins in the smallest, most innocent moments. A text left unanswered, a subtle withdrawal of attention, a tone that feels colder than usual, and suddenly a man starts to lose his balance. Not because the woman has done something dramatic, but because he has placed his sense of worth in her hands. When her approval becomes his validation, he's no longer the man he was. His emotions, once anchored in purpose, now move with the tides of her behavior. This is where the quiet destruction begins, not in betrayal or rejection, but in emotional dependency. A man who once led his own life now waits to be led by emotion. His mood rises when she praises him and collapses when she pulls away. And without realizing it, he begins to trade his inner power for temporary peace. You see, when a man forgets that his emotions are his responsibility, he gives the world permission to control him, and no one can destroy you faster than the one who holds your peace hostage. It's not about the woman being evil or manipulative. It's about the psychological truth that humans by nature shape each other's sense of self. If a man doesn't define himself, the relationship will define him, and usually in ways that shrink his spirit. He starts compromising on small things first. The gym session he skips to avoid an argument. The dream he delays because she doesn't get it. The friends he stops meeting because it makes her uncomfortable. Each little compromise feels like love, but over time, it becomes a quiet surrender of identity. And once that happens, resentment begins to grow. But it's not towards her, it's towards himself. Deep down, he knows he's lost something. The ability to stand alone, to decide for himself, to be centered no matter who comes or goes. This internal conflict creates confusion. He starts asking, what happened to me? Why do I feel weaker, more anxious, more reactive? The answer is simple but painful. He gave away his emotional control piece by piece in the name of love. Real strength isn't found in dominating others or staying emotionally numb. It's found in mastery over one's reactions. When a man can feel deeply yet stay grounded, when he can love fully without losing himself, he becomes unbreakable. But that requires self-awareness. It means recognizing when your need for validation has turned into dependence, when your desire for connection has crossed into control. Philosophically, it's about sovereignty, being the king of your inner world. You can share your kingdom, but never abandon your throne. Because when you do, you don't just lose power, you lose respect, both from yourself and from her. A woman cannot respect a man who needs her to feel whole. She may love him, care for him, even pity him, but respect, that's gone the moment he becomes emotionally enslaved. Every man must reach that defining moment when he decides, I will not live reacting to someone else's mood. I will not chase peace outside myself. Emotional control is not about being cold, it's about being composed. It's about loving without losing yourself, giving without breaking, and caring without craving constant reassurance. Because the truth is, no one destroys a man's life more effectively than the man who refuses to master his own emotions. The woman may trigger the fall, but the real collapse happens within. And when he finally realizes that the power to rebuild lies not in changing her, but in reclaiming himself, that's the moment he rises again. Control your emotions, or they will control your destiny. Destruction doesn't always come with noise. It doesn't always look like shouting matches, manipulation, or heartbreak. More often, it arrives quietly, wrapped in comfort, disguised as love. A man doesn't wake up one day and realize his life has fallen apart. It happens slowly, in moments so subtle they seem harmless. It's when he starts adjusting who he is to keep the peace, when he begins silencing his truth to avoid conflict, when he tells himself, it's not worth the argument, and in that instant, he trades authenticity for acceptance. That's how control begins. Not through force, but through gentle conditioning. A woman may not even be aware of it. It can start with simple preferences, how he dresses, who he spends time with, what goals he pursues. Over time, he starts aligning with what pleases her, and each little compromise chips away at his individuality. The tragedy is that he thinks he's keeping love alive, but in reality, he's watering the roots of his own submission. This dynamic is deeply psychological. Human beings crave harmony, especially in relationships. But when a man equates harmony with silence, When he avoids tension by suppressing his instincts, he becomes easy to mold. And here's where the balance breaks: love turns into control. She begins to realize, consciously or not, that his desire to keep her happy gives her power over his actions. From that point, respect begins to erode, because deep down, she no longer sees him as a man who stands firm. She sees a man who bends too easily. The truth is, most relationships don't end because of betrayal. They die because one person stops being real. A man's destruction rarely comes from being hated. It comes from being tamed. That slow transformation from a man with fire in his spirit to one who's too tired to fight for himself. He starts believing that peace means compliance, that love means pleasing, that sacrifice means surrendering what makes him unique. But no woman truly desires a man who abandons himself to keep her comfortable. Philosophically, this is the loss of masculine polarity, the disappearance of the tension that creates attraction. A woman's nature responds to strength, clarity, and direction. When that fades, when he becomes predictable, safe, and too agreeable, she loses the emotional excitement that first drew her in. And that's the cruel irony. The more he gives up to keep her, the less she feels drawn to him. It's not manipulation in the obvious sense, it's a psychological dance. She may believe she's helping him be better, but what she's really doing is reshaping him into her version of safety, a version that no longer challenges her, no longer leads, no longer inspires, and he, in his blindness, believes that this form of peace is love. But it's not, it's stagnation. The masculine energy that once created, pursued, and conquered now sits quietly, waiting for approval. So how does a man break free? By remembering that love without boundaries is self-destruction. Being kind doesn't mean being controlled. Being gentle doesn't mean being weak. You can love deeply and still say no. You can care for her and still protect your own path. The moment a man starts prioritizing his purpose again, his goals, his discipline, his vision, he begins to restore the respect that was lost. Not by rebelling, but by reclaiming. Because comfort is seductive, but it's also dangerous. It makes you forget your hunger, your drive, your individuality. And the most dangerous woman in a man's life isn't the one who argues. It's the one who convinces him to settle for less than he's capable of. In the end, love should sharpen you, not soften you. It should inspire growth, not obedience. When a man remembers this truth and chooses to live from strength instead of fear, no comfort, no woman, no situation can control him again. Never trade your fire for peace, because the moment you do, you stop being the man you were meant to become. At some point, every man reaches a breaking moment, that quiet realization that he's been living for someone else's validation. It often comes after exhaustion, heartbreak, or the slow death of self-respect. It's when he finally looks in the mirror and admits, "I've lost myself." That moment is painful, but it's also powerful. Because in that space between collapse and clarity, a man is given the opportunity to rebuild, not as who he was, but as who he's meant to be. Reclaiming power doesn't start with anger or revenge, it begins with awareness. You have to see how far you've drifted from your purpose, how much you've compromised your identity just to keep love alive. The first step is to detach, not from the woman, but from the emotional dependency that made her the center of your world. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop allowing someone else's behavior to dictate your inner peace. This is the point where many men struggle, because they confuse detachment with indifference. But there's a difference. Indifference is numbness, a form of running away. Detachment is power. It's the ability to feel deeply while remaining grounded in who you are. When you can stand in love without losing yourself, that's true emotional mastery. From a psychological perspective, this is the rebuilding of the masculine frame, the foundation of identity, direction, and discipline. A man with a strong frame doesn't chase validation, he creates purpose. He doesn't need to be the loudest in the room or the most dominant, he simply knows who he is. And that quiet confidence commands respect, not through force, but through presence. A woman can sense when a man has rebuilt this inner strength. Suddenly his energy changes. He no longer reacts impulsively to her moods or tests. He no longer negotiates his self-worth through affection or attention. He becomes calm, assertive, decisive, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. And this shift doesn't just transform his relationship, it transforms his entire life. Philosophically, reclaiming power is about re-establishing hierarchy, purpose above emotion, vision above validation. It's about remembering that love is not the goal, it's a byproduct of living with direction. A man who leads with purpose first will never have to beg for respect. because his life itself commands it. When he walks away from what no longer serves him, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, he becomes untouchable. The irony is, once he stops chasing her, she begins to see him differently. The same woman who once doubted him now feels drawn to the strength she can't manipulate, the confidence she can't shake. But by then, it's not about getting her back. It's about never losing yourself again. This journey isn't easy. It requires solitude, discipline, and brutal honesty. You'll have to face the parts of you that allowed weakness to take root. You'll have to confront your fears of rejection, of being alone, of not being enough. But once you rise above those fears, you'll discover something far more valuable than her approval: self-respect. Because the ultimate freedom is not found in control over others, but in mastery over yourself. When your emotions serve your purpose instead of sabotaging it, when you can love without clinging and walk away without bitterness, you've reclaimed your masculine essence. Every man must reach that moment when he says, "Enough, I choose myself," not in selfishness, but in self-awareness. Because a man who lives by his values, who moves with purpose, and who refuses to be controlled by emotion, that man can't be destroyed. You don't need to make her chase you. You just need to remember who you are. And once you do, everything you've been chasing will start chasing you.